Hello and welcome to the RIAH Experience Webinar, a monthly webinar series exploring the challenges and mistakes faced when planning a wedding. The goal of the webinar is to give engaged couples a better understanding of what's to come and what will work for them. Its aim is to enrich couples' knowledge and also support the industry while doing it. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again for the second series of the RIAH Experience Webinar. The first one was in October, so if you joined then, thank you. And if this is your first time of joining this RIAH Experience Webinar, and if you don't know me already, my name is Tobi Yusuf. I run RIAH Events and Weddings. As the name says, it's an event and wedding planning company. So this monthly webinar series will be run every month. And what basically we're going to be doing is exploring the challenges and mistakes faced when planning a wedding. And the goal of this webinar is to give engaged couples a better understanding of what's to come and what will work for them. And again, also in the industry, in the wedding industry, is to help my fellow friends in the industry as well. So today for this second series, we're really talking about what is the role of a wedding planner. I mean, if you want to go ahead and plan your wedding yourself, it's okay to do that. But I mean, what are the things that you need to watch out for? What are the things that you didn't think about? So we're going to be, well, not me, we'll be discussing. Rugie here will be discussing that. And also there's a lot of misconception around what a wedding planner does and what a wedding coordinator does. I mean, when I started the business, I remember I was really caught in the deep of, being hired as a wedding coordinator, but then being expected to work as a wedding planner. So, you're going to find out today, what do you expect a wedding planner to do for you? And what do you expect a wedding coordinator to do for you? So today, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Or if you would like to talk, if you want to ask your question, or feel free again to raise your hands and then I can unmute you and then, you can ask your question. So today, as I said, I have here with me the one and only Wurie of Mrs. Wedding Planner. I've known Rugie for quite a while now. I've also had experience, I've had an opportunity to work with her on a few of our weddings. Rugie is an award-winning wedding planner. She's a judge at the Wedding Industry Awards. She's been featured on Sky News, ITV News, BBC News. She's been featured in magazines, and she's an international wedding planner. I really adore her for what she does. She's got vast experience in wedding planning and event planning. So, Rugie, I'm sure you have a lot to share with us today. So please join me and welcome Rugie.
Thank you, Tobi. That was a really nice introduction. You made me feel very proud of myself.
I forgot to add, Rugie is married with 3 children, and her first child, I think he's 17, or how old is he?
I have a 17. Try and tell everyone my age. Yeah, I have a 17-year-old, and I have an 18-year-old and a 9-year-old. So as Tobi has described, an international wedding planner. I'm currently in Sierra Leone planning a wedding. The couple, the bride is British, and some couples are taking advantage of countries where COVID numbers are quite low at the moment, and we have to survive. So we're trying to navigate around the pandemic and how badly hit the industry has been. So I'm here planning a wedding. It's a nice view. I'm going to show you. So you feel, I don't know if you feel upset with me, but you're going to love it. Let me just show you where I am right now.
Sure.
So you can feel a bit jealous.
I for one, I'm jealous.
So if you see me smiling a lot, it's not because I'm happy. It's because of the environment that I'm in.
Yeah. That does matter as well, isn't it? The environment, sometimes
it does help. So as Tobi introduced, today I'll be talking to you about the realities of planning your own wedding. Gone are the days that we discourage people not to plan their weddings. But I believe the role of wedding planners is to be practical. And at the same time, realistic, brutally honest about what to expect. A lot of people get so disappointed in the whole process because, they find out, that the budget is a lot higher than it's supposed to be. They find that, you know, some suppliers would promise something and then they don't deliver. So there are lots of mixed messages, and it often leaves them stressed, anxious, disappointed, and it leaves a sour taste in their mouth. And now we've got Corona, we've got the pandemic. Most people did not expect this. They've paid their deposits, and at the moment, a lot of people are on pause, not knowing whether they should continue planning or just abandon the idea and, you know, invest in a property or, you know, invest in something else. So we're dealing with all these dilemmas, but at the same time, people are still getting proposed to, people are still in love, and some people still have this dream of having their big wedding, their dream wedding, celebrating their family, their success, their love, and everything that goes along with it. So today, Toby and I will attempt to manage your expectations, but also give you hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. If you want to go ahead, we'll tell you the reality of what to expect in the next 6 months. And if you still want to do your big wedding in huge numbers, we could talk to you about the possibility of exploring other destinations or being realistic about your timeline. Yeah, so I don't know if you have any questions so far, because I don't want to keep talking.
But we don't have any questions yet. But again, please feel free to drop in your questions. But I think just to start with really is, if I was to plan my own wedding, because like you said at the beginning, that we're not telling people not to plan their wedding themselves anymore. But, you know, just to start with, what is it that's really required of you to plan your own wedding? I mean, let's just assume you're not a wedding planner yourself, but if I want to plan my own wedding, what is required of me to do that?
I think as individuals, we all know our strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, if you are creative, then this is somewhere you can actually take charge of. Maybe you're creative, but you're not very organized. So maybe the project management side of things, you would look to someone else for support. So whether you have a good friend that's very compartmentalized, whether, you know, this is a very organized friend, or you want to hire a planner specifically for that role, that is something you could consider, because we all have something we're good at. Alternatively, you could be very good at the project management side of things. So you're organized, you're good with your numbers, but you're not creative at all. You don't know what your wedding should look like, and you have no idea where to start in terms of color palettes, the general aesthetics, etc. If you're in that position, you then have to decide what's your priority. What are your strengths? What are your priority? Is having fantastic food a great thing? So that's the second part. The first one, as I mentioned, you have to identify your strengths and your weaknesses. The second one is to decide what your priorities are. Is it incredibly important that you have great food at your wedding? Are you somebody that will not entertain anyone bad mouthing your wedding because there was no food or food ran out? Are you somebody that's a huge fan of a certain celebrity and you want them at your wedding? So you decide your priorities, and you have to scale it in line with your budget. So your priorities and your budget should be on a par. You cannot want to fly in, I don't know, the biggest star, and maybe your budget just about pays for his flights and his time there. Then, you know, maybe you need to listen to the music instead of having him there. So I think that's a second important, that's a key point in identifying how you could go about planning your wedding. And then the third thing is about being realistic about your timeline. How much can you take on? And how many guests are you going to take on? All of these, the numbers game, it's incredibly important. Planning a wedding for any size over 100 guests is a huge wedding, because you're not just thinking of food and beverage, you have to think of the aesthetics, every single table, because, you know, often we have our mothers say to us, oh, I just want 10 more invitations, you know, I'm just gonna have 10 friends. It's nothing, you know, it's just 10 more people. I can pay for the table. If you're being funny, I can pay for the table. But if you think about it, just to break down the figures so you know exactly how things work, A chair, the most cost-effective chairs in the wedding industry cost about £3. Okay, so if you're doing £3 and there are 10 people on the table, that's £30 already just to have a seat. And then if you are somebody that's very particular about how your wedding should look like, they have things like charger plates, glassware, cutlery. These are things you have to pay for. They don't just appear. So by the time you actually do up the sums, you do up your figures for that particular table, it's a significant amount. So I think being strict, you have to be very stringent with your timelines and just manage expectations with your family members as well. Because ultimately, once you decide who's taking care of what in the budget, you have to stick to those timelines. And once you hit the milestones, you've successfully achieved them, you move on. So that's another thing. You have to really, that's the third point. You have to really set a goal for what you want your wedding to be like in terms of numbers, in terms of expenditure, and you stick to it. And the most important point, which should have been the first point actually, you have to remember why you're getting married. What are you doing it for? You're celebrating family and friends. You're trying to put up a show. You're trying to do you believe in the institution of marriage, and are you serious about your commitments and you want to make this known to everyone? Then you have to put all of this into perspective, because you can't be fighting with your partner privately and then you're planning the wedding of the year for Instagram. We have seen many years, we know all the secrets because we plan weddings year in, year out. We see the divorce rate because there's a lot of pressure that comes along with planning. People argue about money. Bride and the groom may have different priorities. One person would want to spend on drinks and another person would want to spend on her dress, her gown. So all of these things I think are very important. So communication is a major part. And ultimately, I think respect and love and trust. If you're going to work with anyone, you should make sure the vendors you hire are people you love and respect and trust. And the way you speak to people and you communicate throughout your planning is exactly what you're going to get. So if you set that pace of respect, love, and trust, you are not going to have a horrible wedding experience. And you're realistic and you keep to your numbers and you see all the points that I mentioned before, you should be all right. And rope in family members and friends that are strong in some of those areas I've highlighted. And the major reason why most people hire wedding planners is sometimes because they want privacy. They don't want their cousins and their friends to know how much they're spending, what areas they're struggling with. They don't want all of that. We know everything. We know the fights, money worries. And because we're not tied, we're not connected to their network of people, it stays private. Discretion is a very important thing in our industry. So that's one thing you have to consider as well. So although you have family members and friends you could rope in, your private information is at their mercy as well. So I mean, you have to use people you trust.
Yeah, I totally agree with the last point. When you rope in family members or friends, there's that emotion is there. Your friend or your family member could get angry at something that you said or you don't want. And then, you just go off tangent with wedding planning. They might say, I'm not doing it again. But as a wedding planner, you don't have a choice. You've got paid to do that job. There's no emotion setting for a wedding planner. You've just got to get on with the job.
Oh, and Tobi, I forgot one last thing. Know yourself and don't be afraid to experiment. So if you know yourself and your creativity and what's important to you, don't be afraid to have a wedding in a restaurant if that's what you like. You don't have to go with the trends.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a cliched wedding. If you want trees all around your wedding venue, do that then. If you like botanical stuff, be a bit gutsy, be a bit creative. Gone are the days that people should just settle for anything. Don't allow people to just bring anything to your wedding. So I think that's important as well. Just know yourself and ask a few questions, and don't get lazy with the planning at the end after you've done all the work, and then you just get a samey, boring wedding. You don't want to do that.
Well, I think getting lazy at the end is where the wedding coordinator then comes in. So yes, we'll talk about that later. But that was one of the things I mentioned in my first webinar, you know who you are, know what you want for your wedding, like be true to yourself. And I think with what we've seen in 2020 now, weddings in 2021 are totally going to be different with the numbers, because we don't know when the numbers are going to increase. And people now are just going to start thinking, what can I do different? I mean, even having a small wedding doesn't mean you still can't enjoy yourself. So, it's not really about the numbers. It's not really about where you have your wedding. It's about what's true to yourself. Rugie, whilst you were talking, you mentioned about vendors and vendor management. That's a big thing. First you have to make sure, how would you know that I can hire the right person, the right vendor for my wedding? I mean, you see things on Instagram. As we know, Instagram is is a life of either real or fake. So I might see a photographer on Instagram with lovely jobs, lovely posts of their weddings, but is that really what I'm going to get at my wedding? Or you see a caterer posting pictures of food, but what sort of food am I really going to get? So if I'm planning my wedding myself, how do I manage my vendors? How do I select the right vendors?
Are you asking me that question?
Yes, that question is to you, Rugie. The questions would only be through to you.
Sorry, yeah. So, how would I manage that situation? I think seeing someone on social media, there's an initial attraction, and it is a good starting point because there's something that they're offering that you like. However, your wedding is unique. It's uniquely special. So you should be able to explore some of your ideas and their ideas, and together you come up with a solid plan that is unique to you. That's number one. Number two, if you have any imagery that you can and stuff, and I think in the consultation, ask questions so you know how they work. You've seen something on Instagram, you might be assuming, this is all you're gonna get. These people are gonna be calling you every night, they come into your house, and then you start feeling disappointed that you don't get the level of delivery or service that you paid for. It could end up making the relationship sour. So as much as you are trying to find a vendor for your wedding, they're also trying to see if you're a right fit for them. So ask all the right questions from the start. Ask them, what service they offer, like how often can you talk to them? So for example, when you're talking to design people, you can say, well, how do you go about your design process? Will I get to see my design before the wedding? Do you provide everything? What do you mean by everything? Because I think remember that most of you are doing this for the first and only time by God's grace, right? So it's not like you've been there, done that several times where you experience, and that's what wedding planners are. Like, we've been married a million times. We know, So I know when I'm talking to you, I'm going to say, okay, so who's going to be responsible for the cutlery then? Chances are they'll say you are, but you wouldn't know. And so last minute, when you call your caterer and you're telling your caterer, also you don't know, we're not, and this person is saying, no, we're not. And it is then too late because you signed your contracts, you haven't asked questions. So before you sign any contract, unravel all the uncomfortable points, go over them, agree with what works best for the pair of you. Believe you me, if your ask is too big, the vendor will pull out. They will say, this is not how I work. But if you can get to a point where you both agree and you meet at a certain point, then your wedding is going to be fantastic. Ask the right questions to understand how they work, to avoid disappointment.
Yeah, well, I mean, that point is a great one in terms of cutleries, because I think sometimes people would think the caterer would bring the cutleries, or the stylist, the decorator would bring the cutleries, and there's always misunderstanding. So it's very, very important to ask all this questions.
Cleaning as well. Who's going to clean your venue afterwards? You assume the venue is going to do it, just so you find out at the very end that you're not going to get your deposit back because nobody cleaned, but you forgot to ask. And some vendors, when they're desperate to sign you up, it's not their job to kind of specify. They have it in their terms and conditions. So it's worth reading those small prints. ask them. These are reasonable people. Just ask them, go back and forth until there's a full understanding and you're both agreed.
Yeah, totally. But going back to vendors again, so you've hired these vendors, you've read all the small prints, you've done everything you can, you have so much trust in this vendor, and then on the day something happens. It's possibly not the vendor's fault. So maybe on the way down to the wedding, there was an accident. They got in an accident, their car, or there was an accident on the road and there's a delay. I mean, and obviously you don't have a wedding planner. And this is where you say that's why you should hire a wedding planner. That's the job of the wedding planner.
As wedding planners, and I think if you're planning your wedding, this is something you should consider as well. Always have a backup plan for everything, okay? Because things happen, things go wrong at weddings. Like when I'm planning a wedding, I'm coming to a destination wedding now. Instead of, I ship stuff from different countries. I did that because I wanted to limit my risks. I knew if I ship stuff from the one place, likelihood is that ship could be held at a port somewhere and I'll never get my stuff. But if I'm having multiple deliveries from different countries, then I've limited my risks, and then before I came here, I already had backup plans with everybody. I had backup plans as though nothing would be available. So yeah, I think it's important to have backup plans, and you have to risk assess everything. Things would happen. You'd have a nice outdoorsy wedding, and then it might rain. What do? Do you start crying and panicking, or would you have had a backup plan anyway? So one of the advantages of having a wedding planner, these people are seasoned for the worst news. Like sometimes we sit there and the supplier says, "Oh, I'm running 2 hours late." And what you do when the suppliers come, you have to muck in and finish it all off. You can't, all the videos that you see of wedding planners in walkie-talkies and Louboutins, that's not very true. We do wear it just, to welcome guests, but we do a lot of running around. So risk assess everything, the weather. What if the caterer comes late? So give him the wrong time so he comes a lot earlier. Risk assess everything. Trust no one. Risk assess everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, so now leading up to the point of a wedding planner and a wedding coordinator, because you just mentioned, bad weather and things like that. But obviously, well, for me, so this is the understanding of wedding planner. Wedding planner really starts from the beginning. They help you plan everything. And like you've just said, they would risk assess everything, vendors, the venue, the day, and anything that may come, they're going to try and avoid all of that. And then you have the wedding
your husband, risk assess your husband and your wives.
Are you saying the husband and wives of the vendors, or of me as a wedding planner? Which one?
No, your own husband and wife. Risk assess the husband you're going to marry and everyone.
If he's going to turn up or not, or if he's going to be late.
Exactly. Assess him. Yes.
Yeah. But yes, that's a good one. I mean, there's been stories there's been real life incidents of the groom, running late, which it's sometimes you think it's the bride that will be running late, but then this time around it's the groom, or the groom doesn't even turn up. So yeah, there's so many things to just risk assess. So as a wedding planner, that's the job of the wedding planner. But then it just goes to, okay, is that really the job of the wedding coordinator? Because what is a wedding coordinator? I mean, I don't like to call it a wedding coordinator. So in my services, I call it wedding day management, because I'm not just coming on the day. I'm not just going to turn up on the day of your wedding without having information about what you've done so far. So I would start working with you like 2 months before your wedding. And then on the day of your wedding, I run things. So that's really the difference between a wedding planner and a wedding coordinator. Like Rugie said, you have to know what's going to happen. You have to ask questions. A wedding coordinator would not ask your vendors those sort of questions. A wedding coordinator would just come on like 2 months before. So with the probability that you've hired all of your vendors, and you're not just telling me, okay, I've booked my vendors, I've booked my venue, so now I just want you to come on the day and make sure everything runs smoothly. And again, on the day, I'm not just going to turn up or anything like that. So Rugie, in terms of wedding planner and wedding coordinator, have you had that experience whereby, you know, you've had to really explain or differentiate the difference between a wedding planner and a wedding coordinator in your life?
Well, I don't do wedding coordination because I think it's a huge responsibility. You're responsible for someone else's plan, and you know, if it goes wrong, it's kind of at your feet, and your guests don't know you're a wedding coordinator. They think you're a wedding planner.
Yeah.
So if anything goes wrong, it's on your head. I find it stressful, although some people prefer it because some people naturally want to plan their own wedding. I would say at best I would do partial planning, but wedding coordination is it's a huge task. So basically you have people come in on the wedding day and they take over your timeline, make sure that everybody does exactly what's stipulated on the timeline, the vendors are on time, and the wedding goes according to schedule. Now, again, as I said, some of these coordinators are not in the know, fully in the know, some of the arrangements that have been made before. So, for example, if the capacity exceeds what you originally planned and food runs out, the wedding coordinator is just going to be left on the lurch. Like sometimes you'd get a nervous breakdown. We've had people who said in their invites, no children, and then the children show up on the day. Now the wedding coordinators have to find a way to cope, and I don't think they're skilled in that department. So it can be a good and bad thing for people that want to minimize costs. They want to cut down, but at the same time, they don't want to be worrying on their day. I think if you're going down that route, be realistic in terms of how many hours. Sorry, I was just reading someone's message.
Yeah.
How many hours someone how many hours the wedding coordinators are supposed to work? You have to clarify that. What time they arrive in the morning and what time they leave. Whether they're going to stay till the wedding finishes. What are their responsibilities? So you have to be very thorough in your handover briefing meeting and tell them everything. You have to tell them everything because on the day it's going to be quite chaotic to go and meet you up on your stage and start telling you certain things. Also, have a major go-to person. It could be your sister, your best man. So, for example, if drinks run out at the tab, this is the person who makes that decision, not the coordinator. There's no need for panic. Like I said, risk assess everything and you'll be fine. So, again, the whole thing about questioning during consultation. Be very thorough. Ask your wedding coordinators what they offer. How many of them will be attending? What's your capacity? Does that ratio balance out? You're having 300 people and then you have 3 wedding coordinators. You might have a problem. Or 2 wedding coordinators. You're going to have a problem. So these are some of the questions you have to be asking, and then make sure that everything again is included in your contract. So, you know, nobody's left on the lurch. So that's what I think. So wedding coordinators, it's kind of on the day and they're gone. You brief them maybe a couple of weeks ahead of your wedding. They're in and out. Wedding planners are like literally your friends and family members in the end. They're really deeply involved in it. They know you in and out. So I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
But I think people are entitled to use any, you know, because you're going to be planning your wedding yourself. You feel comfortable planning it, you can just have someone at the end. If you don't feel comfortable, then have a planner or have a good network of people helping you out.
Okay. Thank you for that. But someone's just dropped a question, but I don't know. I think maybe we'll just answer it later on during the Q&A session. So Tanisha Johnson, thank you for joining. You said you joined late, but yes, we'll have a read through your question later on, if that's okay.
Thank you for watching my webinar part 1. Hope you found it useful. If you'd like tips on anything, please do let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure we have a webinar on those topics. Please feel free to give me any feedback on this webinar. Please support me by liking, subscribing, and also sharing my video. See you on part 2.